Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're back here at the froglight farm. For a quick update, I have added in the white frogs now. I went out to the jungle biome, past this nether portal, I bred up a bunch of white frogs, or at least raised them from tadpoles, and they are now providing the pearlescent variety of froglight to this whole setup. I also spent a little bit of time digging out an area over here on this side, completely clearing it of lava, so that we could get a better angle on a storage system for all of these, because they are coming in quite quickly at this point, and with the setup I had, I was powering this block, which meant I was locking the hopper every time the hopper minecart came in to rest, meaning that all of the items were getting stuck in the hoppers a little bit further back. And what I want to do to start off this video is to create a quick hopper minecart unloading system that's going to cause the hopper minecart to pause here until it has unloaded all of its contents, because right now it runs over a couple of the hoppers, delivers some items to this chest, but really, if we let the hopper minecart come back to rest here, it's going to drop off a lot more than the 2 or 3 items it's able to drop off during the brief time it runs over those hoppers. And that includes a few more pearlescent froglights coming in, so those are thankfully catching up to the amount of verdant and ochre froglights that we were able to gather with our first batch of frogs. So a little bit later on, I think we probably want to come through and renovate this whole bastion remnant at some stage. I think it'd be really cool to turn this into kind of a base, but I don't want to start that project right away because we're already working on renovating an ancient city, and having 2 structure renovation projects like that is going to feel like a bit of a heavy workload. But in the meantime, I'm going to eliminate a bit more of the lava over here on this side by dropping in some gravel, and that will at least give us the room we need to work here. But what that means is it's now safe to access this minecart collection mechanism, and from the side here, I'm actually going to reconfigure the hoppers, and having exposed this part of the minecart collection system, I realized that we don't actually need to relocate that hopper at all, because we're not going to be powering this block. We're going to be powering a block here adjacent to the minecart rail on this side, and that's going to require us to reroute the hopper through here, because if that hopper was underneath, it would be pulling items out of this, and it might do that faster than this system is able to act. So what we want to do is place a single block there with a comparator reading the input hopper, the hopper that's collecting all of the items from the hopper minecart, and it's actually going to start collecting items from a block further back, but that shouldn't be a problem. That's not going to be anything to worry about. We're going to feed the comparator signal into a block that's going to have a redstone torch on the other side, so the comparator switches off that redstone torch whenever this hopper is receiving contents. The rest of the time, we want this redstone torch to power this rail so that the minecart is always moving and only stops here when it comes back to drop off items. That's going to require us to have a repeater there with no delay and a solid block there. That's going to send the minecart off on its way, and let's see what happens when it returns to the drop-off point. Yep, there we go. It stops on there and gets pushed away again, so that's working splendidly. Let's hop back up here so that we activate the magma cube spawner. I've cleared out some of the bridge area as well, because it seemed like a couple of magma cubes were able to spawn up there on the bridge or on the edge of the roof of this shelter in the middle here. So as before, the magma cubes are going to take some freezing damage. They're going to split up into the medium-sized magma cubes and from there into the smaller ones. And the frogs are just going to start collecting all of the froglights for us. When we hop back down here, we can take a quick look at our collection mechanism, and hopefully the hopper minecart should stop here on this rail. Now, with the hoppers adjacent to this rail as it turns this corner, you might notice that the track flickers ever so slightly and then comes back on, because the hopper minecart is actually large enough in terms of its hitbox that it's dropping items off into these hoppers as it turns around that corner. Like, it very slightly overlaps with the hoppers that are on this block here, but that's really not a problem. It'll do that for the space of maybe transferring 1 or 2 items, if that, and then the rest of the time it will return to the docking station right here, and it will stop for long enough that it unloads its contents and then be sent on its merry way again. Which in this case is quite a lot of content. It paused there for quite a while, and it's dropped off all of those items here in the chest. So once that hopper notices that it's no longer receiving any items, the whole system reactivates and the hopper minecart is sent on its way again. That's a really useful system, and it's going to make sure the collection mechanism for this is a lot more effective, since we're not locking any hoppers and we're stopping the hopper minecart for long enough that it unloads all of its contents. And now we have all of these froglights, I kind of want to take a bunch of them back to my central base where I've been storing some of the blocks that we've been getting from 1.19. Oh, I didn't realize we'd missed an ancient debris in here, and we got some gilded blackstone and some other loot as well. What I really want from this, actually, is the chest, and thankfully there are no more piglins around to really mess with us as we break that. We do have some lava sharks over here. Whoa, all right, hello. Okay, I do need to put a boundary around this so that the magma cubes don't surprise me like that. What I was gonna say after my heart stops beating really fast is that we want to make ourselves a shulker box and carry home a whole bunch of these froglights. Yeah, when we come back and do some more renovations around here, I'm definitely gonna put a larger wall around the outside of this, because we want all of the magma cubes channeled in here, but occasionally one of them will spawn on the edge like that, and when it does, it can hit you on the way down. And I didn't bother to bring any fire resistance potions with me the whole time, kind of to prove a point about how easy it was to get rid of this without fire resistance, but you know what, maybe on second thoughts that wasn't such a fancy idea. And there we go, we've already gathered enough to fill a shulker box pretty much. While we clearly have the most of the verdant froglights since we moved the green frogs in first, we are getting a pretty decent amount of the pearlescent ones now. And you know what, we'll bring the magma cream as well. If we wanted to, we can craft that into magma blocks, but it's also really useful to have for fire resistance potions, ironically. But with that taken care of, we're going to leave our frogs here for now, and we're going to fly back through this tunnel all the way to spawn. I got a very British welcome from spawn. It started raining as soon as I got back and slept, but we can now move our froglights into the storage system. We've got pearlescent froglights in there, and ochre froglights in here. But that means I should now be able to throw the shulker box in here, and the system will unload it into the right spot. Yeah, ochre froglights coming on into the storage system. Wonderful, and I'll just manually drop off the rest of these because there were too many to fit in a shulker box. And with the froglights now in the system, I was looking around my spawn area, and honestly, this place is kind of a mess, and I've left it a mess after a few different projects. For example, we have a little frog breeding pool here, which I'm probably going to cover back up. We've got a couple of areas where I was demonstrating lay mechanics. There's an ender chest just sat out here along with a bed, and all of these frogs and other animals don't really have much of a home to speak of. I've still got my early game crop farms out here. The cactus farm probably needs moving at some stage, and the whole area needs tying together a little bit more, which is why I thought we could spend a bit of today talking about terraforming and some of the stuff that we can do in this general area to help the whole thing feel a little bit more coherent. And aside from patching up stuff in the terrain like this, there are a few fundamental principles that I really want to follow if we're going to be terraforming in this area. The first one being that we're not going to just flatten everything out. I feel like a lot of the time when people end up terraforming an area, especially if they're starting a larger project, their instinct is to just flatten out areas of the world, and that can lead to everything looking a little bit dull and bland. That's really not what I want to do here. Instead, a rule I think people should follow more frequently, and a rule that I try and keep in my head whenever I'm terraforming, is that you should treat the landscape like you're molding clay. You're not going to lose or gain too much in the process. You might trim out a little bit of it here and there if it doesn't fit the overall shape of what you're going for, but try and push and pull blocks around. Not literally, obviously not with pistons, but you know what I mean? Like, try and shape the landscape as though you're shaping it with your hands and just pushing areas of it into different places. For example, if we're going to cut a channel through this grassy area here so that we don't have to hop up and then down again when we're walking over towards the storage system, maybe we start to pile that up as a bank of dirt on either side, or like have a retaining wall or something here that's holding back a shelf of dirt there. I'm probably going to remove some of the natural trees in favor of bringing them back in with a custom-built tree a little later on, but in the meantime, we can probably work with some of what we're doing over here. I have a wall of tuff separating this area that I walk past a whole bunch from this little inlet from the river, and there's a willow tree that I designed over here that I still want to swap the leaves out for mangrove leaves. Maybe we'll do that a bit later today. But we can use the tuff kind of like a retaining wall and hold back some of the dirt that might otherwise slide down into our path if this was the real world. If you want something that has stairs and slabs, I often find that mossy cobblestone works best in combination with tuff, so we can use that to smooth out some of the areas where this wall close up might look a little blocky. We can even start to work a couple of these little details into this grassy area at the top of our retaining wall, because one of the things I find a little frustrating about Minecraft sometimes is how much of the surface terrain is just one block. It's basically all grass, or in some areas it'll be all stone or all snow. But in real life, that's not always the case. Even my back garden isn't just a perfectly manicured patch of grass. There are stones, there are little rocks and stuff here and there are paving slabs. Even on a more natural trail out there in the world, you'll probably find a decent amount of diversity in the terrain you're walking on. If we're going to have a custom tree here, we could have some rooted dirt and maybe a bit of grass path around the outside, maybe some shady areas where the sun doesn't reach and the grass can't grow as well. And maybe there are some areas where the grass grows even better because of the amount of leaves that drop in the area, kind of breaking down and always providing the grass with nutrients. There are a couple of different ways you can look at it, but the key is diversity. We can bone meal the grass around here to get a little bit of slightly taller grass, and that can help the whole thing feel a bit more natural. Of course, if we bone meal the moss, we'll get the same thing, but we'll also get little azalea shrubs and moss carpet. And even without the tree growing here, it starts to feel more like a feature of the world. It starts to feel more alive. Aside from small detail patches like this, though, we need to start looking at the bigger picture and what helps a landscape feel like a landscape. More often than not, when we're standing back and looking at a landscape, we're not going to see all of that small up-close detail. We're going to be seeing things in much larger areas, and so in order to make a landscape feel more coherent, imagine this being a painting. We have to start using some fairly broad brush strokes. Like right here is a good example. On the walk up this hill, all I really see is the brown sides of the grass blocks and a little shelf of grass poking over each one, but for the most part, it feels like I'm looking at a wall of dirt as I walk up to my storage house. And that's where around the outsides here, I'm going to put in some moss blocks. I think these look really good at making the edges of these platforms of dirt a little bit more concealed. We can even start to spread these with bone meal, since moss will spread to grass quite happily. And perhaps most importantly, we're spreading this over quite a large area. And I'm not quite sure if the azalea shrubs and the tall grass are to my taste yet, but already this feels like a much nicer looking hillside. And that's really with minimal effort as well. All I've done is spam a bit of bone meal, and the results are quite dramatically different. Moss even gives you the opportunity of having it look like grass is growing over 2 blocks worth of vertical space, which is something grass blocks really don't allow, because if you put a grass block on top of a grass block, for a start, they look a little bit disjointed, but the second one below reverts to dirt because it has a block on top of it. You can even add in a bit of mossy cobblestone down here to give the illusion that the moss is growing down over a piece of rock that would otherwise be exposed. But despite all these lovely looking changes, we are left with the problem of this hill here being kind of steep. And that's partly on me. I did end up building my storage room at the top of a hill that just kind of climbs up block by block. But it's a little awkward getting into here right now. And for the last little while, I have just been hopping up onto this half-finished, walkway out the front of my storage building. Some of it is just dangling in mid-air right now, and that's really something I wanted to fix today. But it's going to be a bit awkward making a path up the slope like this, and even if we put in slabs, that means we're still going to have like a 2-block wide area so that 1 block can be a full block, 1 block can be a slab, and it can climb up like a staircase. Instead, we're going to do something different, because that's really not how things would work in real life. I feel like naturally, you're not going to want to climb up a massive hill to get to a building as convenient as a storage system. And so what we're going to do is actually turn the path to one side, and we're going to go through this way, and the path is going to wind up towards this storage building, which means we can take advantage of flatter areas, which are also going to look a lot nicer when we terraform them. Now, that is going to mean taking up some of the moss that we just made over here and building a path through the forest. We're going to clear a few trees as we go, but I think this is going to be worth it. We can steal some of the blocks from this hillside. Once again, thinking about what I said earlier, how we're molding the terrain like clay instead of just removing it and putting new stuff in its place. Where we want to have a step up, we can make little raised walkways of slabs like that, and they don't even have to just be single steps. They can be a little bit more shallow if we want to. Where we want to have a step up, we can have these shallow platforms of spruce slabs. They can be oak as well if you think that works better with the grass path look, but I quite like spruce. I think we're going to build up another retaining wall on this side and maybe a bank of dirt here that's going to allow us to put another custom tree feature, and will also channel the player's movement in this direction rather than having them assume that they can go left. I'm allowing the terrain to guide me a little bit here as well. We have quite a steep bank of dirt and stone on this side, so I'm going to leave that there for now. We could turn it into a bit more of a feature wall later on if we want to, but in the meantime we can just close all of that off and have the slope come up and around the natural grade of the hill and start to wind back towards the storage system somewhere over here. And once you get to an area like this, you're going to be tempted to go basically straight up the side of this hill again. But remember, this is really not the kind of terrain that we want to be navigating. And think about it, if you're walking around in the real world, how often do you go up up a slope that's at like a 45-degree angle. Unless you live in San Francisco, probably never. So even though it involves cutting out large chunks of the terrain here, and it's going to feel really weirdly slow only stepping up a slab each time, this is a much more natural feeling path than that. As the path doubles back on itself, we've had to cut into the rock here, and I'm kind of fine with that actually, because it gives you a shelter from the rain, and now if you wanted to, we have a cool tunnel feature that you can figure out. And now as we come around the side here, you'll find that this is a much more natural slope. Goes through this little natural feeling tunnel and then comes out the other side. Obviously, it's taken a lot more steps to get up here, but once again, this is all about terraforming. It's about aesthetics, and it's about everything feeling a bit more natural, which does mean that a lot of the time we have to discard the concept of things just being convenient for the player. At a certain point, some real-world aesthetics have to take over. And if we weren't able to jump 1 meter from a standing start in Minecraft, this is probably something we'd be forced to do anyway. But you will now notice that retaining wall and all, we have made it up to the level of our storage building. And now we have a natural feeling path that carries us all the way from the bottom of this hill around this curve to the top of the hill. And given that we have a pretty large spruce platform here, I might go back and adjust a couple of these just so these sections are a little wider. I did make them slightly more shallow when I wanted to make sure that we were stepping up half block every couple of blocks to make sure that we met up with this, but it's clear that we had enough leeway, and you can always push and pull some of this stuff around once it's built, just in case you want to adjust some of the proportions further down the line. And if we take a look at this from the air, this already feels way more natural. There are a few things that we need to tweak a little bit. The retaining wall looks a little bit bland in places, could do with some texture, but I think we can probably build something here that's going to make it feel a bit more natural that the path had to turn around this way instead of just making a wooden staircase straight up to the front door here. So I think what we're going to do is turn this area into a larger rock formation that's actually going to stand over the path by a few meters, and that's going to make it feel a lot more impassable and give a bit more shape to this area. We're going to start out by doing this just with natural stone, I think, because it's a nice easy material to remove. I have a haste beacon up there if we need it, and we're going to kind of follow the natural lines that we've created here by spamming moss up the side of this hill. One of the most important things in this case is going to be making sure that no dirt is visible underneath the stone, because we really want it to feel like the stone goes all the way into the ground. It's a big natural rock formation that's been there for a while, and already that's starting to feel like it's walling off this area here, making it feel less like, oh, this is just a hill that we could climb, and it forces you to go around this way towards this path. I'm going to work in a few little patches of tuff so that there are bare stones exposed in the ground. We could maybe even throw a little bit of texture in there using grass path to make them feel a bit more three-dimensional. But then I'm going to stick another wall in up here as well, and I kind of want these to feel like layers, like they kind of complement each other when viewed from down there on the path. And I do want to have a couple of green features in between these, just kind of popping out from behind the wall, just so we can make out the difference between the front wall and the back wall when seen from the ground, because otherwise they all just start to merge into this mass of stone. I think it's still a fun idea to texture this a little bit with some tough and mossy cobblestone around the bottom here. It just kind of gives the idea that this has eroded away a little bit more. We'll throw in a couple of andesite blocks here and there as well, and those do have stairs and slabs if you want those to look a little more detailed. And I think we actually need another wall kind of around here, cutting off some of the moss from this side, but we just need something else to balance it on this side of the hill. Yeah, that looks so much more interesting than the hill we had before. I'm really starting to like this a lot. And it doesn't exactly spoil the view we had from our storage room before. The path is the only thing that really feels new because we're looking out over the top of all of these new walls. Now that I put in the stone here, I have to be a little more careful about bone mealing the moss though, because it will take over some of the stone if I'm not careful. But we can bone meal the grass here for a little bit of tall grass and some flowers. And I like the idea of having some azalea leaves growing like bushes around here. Helps the whole thing feel a bit more natural, a bit more wild. And as I was saying earlier, helps throw in some greenery that differentiates the wall in front from the wall behind, giving this a lot more depth when it's viewed from the road. We've got to tidy up a couple of the connections here, make sure that our road into the lower storage system is built out, but honestly, I'm thinking this place looks really nice now. So now with this little entranceway tidied up and looking a little bit better supported by all of the tuff and the mossy cobblestone, I can also turn some of my attention to some stuff that we need to fix, like the fact that this has been open for a while and around the corner we don't have anything supporting all of the storage system stuff. For a start, we can lay down some green terracotta here, although is that That's lime terracotta, that's not green. That's why I haven't fixed it, even though I had some in storage. It's one of those weird tricks of the lighting in Minecraft that if you look at the side of this, it looks very similar to that. I do think they are very distinct colors when you look at them from one side, but the fact that block faces are lit differently on different surfaces to simulate the fact that there is natural light in Minecraft can get a little confusing sometimes, I'll admit that. But now, as we have done on the other side, we can blend this section of the building with the hillside just by throwing in a bunch of moss, and I think we'll probably blend it upwards into the floor above around here as well. We've still got a bunch of dirt and stuff inside of this building. I'm not going to be fixing absolutely everything that's wrong with it today, but I know this has been bothering some people for a while, so quite happy to get this taken care of. And even though this area shouldn't spawn anything anyway because it's all redstone dust and mobs don't typically spawn on that, I'm still going to throw a couple of torches down just in case. And at one point while I was building this, I had the notion that this area should be sort of symmetrical so that there might be entrances on both sides, but then of course this side, if I dug through the wall here, would just end up being the other side of my storage. I'd come out behind some of these chests and whatnot. So I think we'll probably end up closing this off. And you know what? We could terraform another kind of rock formation here to conceal this part of the building and give us a reason that we don't really go over here. I kind of dug it out so that we could continue the building downwards, but most of this stuff can just be covered up at around ground level here. And as before, we don't need to exactly fill this in. We just need to make sure that it is adequately lit on the inside, and we can always reopen that space if we want to use it for something in future. At this point, I will also advocate for leaving yourself a 2-block thick layer of terrain. This is something I picked up from my good friend Fwip, and it's a really useful technique for if you want to texture the top level of something like this. You can put some gravel on the surface or something like that, anything that's gravity affected, concrete, powder, sand, whatever you want to put in there, without worrying about it falling through the terrain, because it has a layer of dirt underneath the layer that you are actively terraforming. The other reason to do this is if you've got a large area exposed down here, especially if you're building larger features of terrain like hillsides and mountains and whatnot. This prevents you breaking one block when you're changing out some of the surface blocks of the terrain and causing lighting updates. So the light would flood in from the sky, would light up everything down there on the ground, and that actually causes quite a lot of lag in Minecraft. The way light is calculated can be quite intensive if it changes a lot in a short space of time. And that's just one of those minor things, but more often than not, you will have enough resources to cover everything with a 2-block thick layer, because there'll probably be a lot of dirt and grass hanging around in your storage systems that you're not doing a whole lot with. So it's often worth doing stuff like this just so you don't cause yourself even more problems later. So we'll throw another feature rock here made out of tough and mossy cobblestone for the most part. We'll probably start texturing a few other blocks in there as well. But a big chunky rock like that is really going to help this thing blend with the landscape. Once we decorate this with a little bit more moss and a couple of other features, I think it's going to blend in really nicely. We could do the same on this side actually, since this side of the hill is a little bit bare right now. I might even plant a little bit of moss here and bone meal it and allow the moss to take over the side of some of these blocks of tuff, and that will feel a lot more organic. It has now become a climbing frame for zombie piglins. Get out of here, you. A few more azalea leaves around here just to give the idea that this is like a somewhat maintained hedgerow, and to separate the little deck section over there from the boulder. I think this is looking really good. And what a difference that makes when we're looking at it from over here at our starter house. It really feels like a rock garden or something is leading up to this place, and it helps the entrance to it feel a little more secluded. Makes me want to explore up there a little bit more. But folks, I think that's probably where we're going to wrap things up for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I've got my Empire's SMP skin on, and I need to go and do a little bit more work on that server later today. But thank you so much for watching the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.